Well, AADM would like to welcome you guys out today. Today we're going to have a town hall about the jail forum. We've been getting complaints over a period of a year, year and a half, coming from the jail from different entities, whether it was an inmate, someone who was in there before, a family member, an employee, a lot of different entities. And they're kind of disturbing. And we know that there was an audit done in 2018 on the jail. At the time, there was another sheriff in office, Chef Ira, and there was a lot of things, a lot of different findings that was related to staffing and operation and staff being overworked and feeling intimidated to make suggestions or to file complaints. And so we just wanted to revisit that as an organization and look at where are we today? You know, we've had a change in command. That's been 2 years ago. You know, are there any improvements in the jail? And based off these complaints, I feel like we definitely need to look into that. And we're just encouraging our mayor and commissioners to also, you know, see this as an urgency and respond to their, you know, constituents and people in the community. And first off, I would like to start off by bringing Ms. Stephanie Maddox Johnson to join me here.
They have my mask off.
You can have your mask off, it's okay.
Thank you.
So Ms. Johnson was the internal auditor at ACC for 6 years. In 2018, she was the one that actually conducted the audit of the sheriff's office. And she's going to start off by just reading a brief overview of some of the results as I ask her questions about it, so we can just visit what those conditions were and what was going on, just in case you wasn't familiar with the results of the audit.
Thank you, Noah.
But also, I just want to say though, you know, another reason that we're doing this is we just want to make sure that the jail is operating correctly, you know, and if there's any concerns for public safety, inmate safety, we want to know how the complaint and the suggestion process work for both inmates and employees. We would like to know, have there been any improvements since the audit in 2018 by the new administration? We want to know what improvements are being prioritized currently and how is the progress on those things. And if there are any challenges that exist that affect these improvements, we want to know that also as a community. And I'm sure the mayor and commissioner would like to know that stuff also if they don't already. So that's the reason we're doing this town hall. All right, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you, Noah, and thank you to AADM for this opportunity to talk about the results from the 2019, approved 2018, and finalized in 2019 of the Clarke County Sheriff's Office. The audit was approved by the mayor and commission in January 2019. The audit started in March 2018 and it ended, the draft report was submitted in February 2019. The report was accepted by the mayor and commission on the record in September 2019. Because it's been so long since the audit has been conducted, I want to read specifically the 4 major areas that we found to be of concern in the audit. The original scope focused on staffing and supporting the sheriff's office in boosting their staffing or increasing their staffing levels or retention ideas and recruitment suggestions. And as we started the audit and it began to unfold, there were other issues that were all tied together, and I'll go over those 4 issues. The most significant one is the staffing shortage. The jail division and field division were both understaffed. Specifically in the jail division, the staffing level was not sufficient to sustain the shift assignments. The employees were mandated to mandatory overtime across the board in every division. The bulk of the overtime hours were inherently assigned to jail staff, and is proximity and familiarity with jail operations, even though all employees begin their career at the sheriff's office. The shifts at the jail are 12-hour shifts, and they're usually served alone in a pod. The deputies that were mandated to work these 12-hour shifts had their own regular work schedule and additional overtime. Here's an example. Despite the staffing shortage in the field division, field deputies were regularly assigned from their routine positions of serving warrants or providing courthouse security to fill in staffing gaps at the jail. And they had to do one 12-hour shift. The reassignment of the field road deputies resulted in an increase in the number of outstanding warrants. That became a resulting issue of pulling the staff off of the road. The morale and leadership was the second most significant area of concern. There were several elements that contributed to the poor employee morale at the sheriff's office. Mandatory overtime was by far the number one reason. It had a significant impact on the employee morale, and the primary reason was overtime was mandated because of the recruitment and retention and staffing shortages and the high turnover rate. Originally established to discourage employees from calling in sick when required to work overtime, the sheriff's office instituted a leave usage policy. Instead of referring to the policy in its correct name, the leave usage policy, employees in every position and rank, from administrative to sworn, including captains, nicknamed that policy the sick leave policy. Employees stated that they felt punished. Employees were working their regular schedule, and then at the end of their work week, they were required to work mandatory overtime. And as you can imagine, people get sick and worn down, and they would call in sick. The sheriff's office implemented a sick leave policy that turned into a punishment. They had to use their sick leave or their FMLA. And we all know that when you're sick, if your child has a temperature, for an example, you don't take them to the doctor every single time. You know how to manage it. But that's what happened. The third reason, safety and security. We heard this a lot in areas from the staff, from areas from the jail to the road to the courthouse. There was an anonymous survey designed at the very beginning of the audit, and 65% of the survey respondents stated that jail security needed to be improved. They stated that components of jail operations are unsafe and expose the entire jail to possible security threats. Deputies assigned to jail division report feeling vulnerable when calling for backup. Due to the staffing shortages, they did not know if anybody would respond. I heard that more than 50% of the time. According to survey responses and in-person interviews, the number of disciplinary days an inmate is supposed to receive for an infraction does not always follow the established parameters outlined in the inmate policy. Deputies stated disruptive inmates are removed from the unit but are then returned earlier than their sentence, which emboldened the inmates to continue negative behavior. The majority of interviewed reported that the general consensus amongst staff is that the inmates ran the jail. I heard that during the audit. I heard that out amongst other public agencies, public safety agencies, and I took a class at the police academy, an interviewing class at the police academy during this same time period, and I identified myself as being from Clarke County, and the other public safety professionals in the room stated, "Oh, you work for the county that the inmates run the jail." So it was a real issue. The perception was real, I should say that. In the last most concerning area to the employees was training. They felt they were not equipped to perform their duties, which contributed to the high turnover rate. The training offered to the new hires declined significantly since the opening of the new jail. Prior to the opening of the new jail, veteran deputies reported receiving months of training and the opportunity to rotate and work in every area of the jail. Over the years, Sheriff's Office stopped providing this comprehensive training on jail operations to new hires. Instead, the new hires were offered 3 to 5 days of training before they were assigned to work in a pod, alone with up to 60 residents. This is what they're referred to at the Clarke County Jail. In reviewing the interviews and the survey responses and in observations, new hire training was not sufficient to address the buildup in the confidence of officers. What it surmounted to was the employees did not have the confidence that they knew how to do the job adequately, and they feared, due to the lack of skills that they had coming in and no additional skills to strengthen their knowledge of how to handle different situations in the jail. Those are the 4 major areas, but I have the specific findings, and I'm happy to speak from those directly now or after, but I just wanted to go over those 4 areas.
Was there any findings like related to the complaint process not being sufficient enough, or people feeling like they wasn't being heard or the process wasn't working for them?
It was not part, that area of concern was not part of the scope.
Okay.
However, I did hear that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And do you know if there was any findings of like civil rights violations?
I did not identify any. That wasn't part of the scope as well.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And was there areas that the audit didn't cover that there could be things needing to be revealed or needing more transparency in? Or you feel like it covered the whole, enough to understand how the jail was actually operating?
Well,
Okay.
there was room for improvement. I did one day, I served one day in what they call Charlie 1, which is like the eyes and ears, and you're in a room, and it's a blackout tent. No one knows you're in there, and you see everything. You have a bazillion cameras, and you can see every area of the jail and behaviors. And there were incidences that I was concerned with, but it wasn't part of the scope. There's room for improvement, but that's not high on the list when we think about the staff declining at exponential rates.
Okay. I appreciate all that information. I think It tells a pretty good story of what was going on around the time. Staff feeling overworked and intimidated, and a lot of different things came out of that audit, and that's one of the reasons why we still would like to know, have any of those things improved? Where are we today? And we invited the sheriff and people from the sheriff's office to come out, to be able to hear the audit results from that, and to come right after that and basically tell us, what has improved, what challenges do they have that still exist, but they couldn't make it, so we decided to go ahead on and move forward with this anyway. So thank you, Ms. Johnson.
I have one last comment.
Okay.
I would like to add, for just full disclosure and fairness, that when the audit findings and recommendations were discussed with the Sheriff's Office and the Audit Committee, and that's the committee of 5 commissioners that review the results of the report before it is forwarded to the full commission for approval. And the Sheriff's Office was very motivated in making changes. If you can imagine that some of the employees had been there 20 or 30 years and ideas run out, that was a small aspect of it. But in our observations with other public safety agencies, we brought back ideas, and they actually followed up with these agencies and implemented some of those things. So there was a concerted effort to improve some of the conditions. There were some conditions they did not agree existed out of the 4. So I just wanted to say that, because they did want to make improvements.
And would you say this was before the new administration, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Before. All right. Thank you very much. Next, I would like to call Ms. Goings up. How you doing, Ms. Goings?
Doing well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity today.
Definitely. Could you introduce yourself to the audience and your background?
Yes, my name is Jessica Goings. I've been employed with had past tense, for 25 years and had the opportunity of working in the jail section for many years. My spouse, we've been married now for 22 years, and we have 11 kids. Fortunately, everybody's been doing really good, and we've been really well known and received within the community. I think because of our standing in the community is why we've had such a successful reputation when it comes to the community and people inside the jail.
So you said 25 years?
Mm-hmm. 25.
And so that puts you under, I guess, like 3 different administrations.
That is correct. It was under Sheriff Massey, then Sheriff Edwards, and then down to John Kim.
Okay. So we feel like no one from the department was ever able to make it, but we have a person who worked for 25 years under 3 administrations, and I think her perception of what was going on could definitely help give us some insight to what's going on. So you say you're not employed there now. How long has that been a fact?
February 26th of 2022.
Okay, so that's pretty recent. So you should know kind of what's going on there right now. Can you tell us why you're not there anymore?
I had become injured on the job, and then afterwards, I went on short-term disability, FMLA operations, and then into long-term disability, and because I'm still not able to work,
Okay.
I'm no longer able to fill my capacity.
So were you also employed there when the audit that Ms. Johnson was just talking about was conducted?
Yes.
Okay.
What Ms. Johnson said was very true. She was very professional, eloquent, and sincere in talking with all of the staff members. I do want to mention, though, when the audit was presented, it was presented to our team members that it was going to be anonymous. So everybody freely wanted to answer, and they were told, be transparent, tell the truth. Sometimes the truth isn't what people want to always hear. You got to be careful what you search for. And during that time frame, when the truth came back, there was retaliation. And in that retaliation, many of the subordinates up to different individuals in the command staff level felt that. Because although the questionnaire would seem broad in nature, depending on the questions, sometimes would let you know and identify which section was being talked about. As Ms. Johnson said, there were some areas that were corrected and met with no problems. Although during that time frame is when the new election was just starting, and John Q and Sheriff R. Edwards were saying, I can do it, I can do it better. So Sheriff R. Edwards really tried to move forward, to move things, and as mentioned, there was a committee board, and I remember at that time, Chief Cole had a checklist in terms of what he was answering to, or he would come and ask me, because at that time I transferred over to the administrative section, which dealt with the policies. So many of our policies did need updating and approval. Additionally, some of the suggestions from the other counties were taken into consideration, like, yeah, we need to move on that. So we did move forward and attempt to meet some of those things, although Sheriff R. Edwards would not agree that the jail was a dangerous place. He would not agree that there might be too much over mandatory that was being done at the jail. So it differed, and again, the perception of how you want to see it, I guess, could be looked at in different ways. Although working there at the jail, the jail was dangerous. And it was based on the visions, based on those visions and the theology behind how to rehabilitate, took a lot of the control that the officers had that would have empowered an officer to have control. What I mean by that, you can ask an individual to do something, and it's all how you ask. Again, in the end, there's going to be compliance. You are asking them in a respectful way, and in turn, they will respectfully say, okay. But then, in some cases, where there were problems with the inmates had risen to a level that had been very confrontational. And the officers in some of the areas did not have any type of weapons to protect themselves. 2015, 2013 was the first time we actually introduced that we had a gang problem in the jail, in the old jail. And there really was not an interest that really was happening here in Athens, but it was happening here in Athens. In 2015, when we moved to the new jail, we were never ready to move to the new jail. Number one, we were already short-staffed at the old jail, and there were concerns. How are we going to staff this new jail? Whether or not we were heard, we still moved on, and policies and procedures were put in place. And based on the factors that we already knew, it already caused us to move in with understaffing. And then because direct supervision has a background where officers are not empowered to have any type of weapons because they're supposed to, community policing. You get to know your area. So if there's a problem, you call on the radio and then somebody else comes in and solves your problem. But because of no understaffing, there was a problem at times with understaffing. At the end, when the sheriff did not win the re-election, he kind of checked out. And when he checked out, the morale just sunk lower and lower. And the ability to motivate based on the theology harmed the members, in addition to some of the inmates, because there really was no solid foundation where control was there, where if you were to give a directive, then that you would have compliance from the inmates. Because at that time, some of them, depending on if they had nothing to lose, were very challenging. And the officers were constantly being written up. So finally, they just threw their hands up in the air and they were just like, I'm just gonna sit at this desk, I'm not gonna move, and it just kind of bottled over and became worse.
So I would ask you, when did... Okay. I would ask that before the change of command, what was your perception of this new administration coming in? How did you feel about this change of guards?
When John Q ran for election, I was so excited. I was excited because of vision. In order to grow, you've got to be willing to change with the trend. And the times are no longer as they were. And I respect that we had to grow and change from where we were to where we needed to be. And what John Q was saying, I bought it. I drank the Kool-Aid, hook, line, and sinker. So I was so humbled by the opportunity when he asked that I come over and be the major over the jail.
So since this new administration been there, I know there's still probably some problems over there, but is there anything that they've implemented that you agree with?
What has been implemented is community service-based. They're more out in the community. They put more staffing on the road and put more staffing in the courts. But the most prevalent and successful area would have been the outreach program.
far as the complaint process, I was trying to see was there anything in the audit that was, revealing that the process wasn't working? What is your experience with the complaint process?
The beauty, and I'm going to go on based off of the last question, because while the improvements were community-based and the warrants and division got more people and the courts got more people, those people came from the jail. So when they come from the jail, who do I get to sit in a unit and watch over to ensure the safety and care of the individuals that we take oath that we will serve? So I put forth my concerns that the staffing was causing an issue and more shortages. Operational, there should be 22 individuals staffed at the jail. When Ira Edwards was in position, we varied, ranging from about 13 to 17. When I became the major, there was 12. That includes 3 supervisors who are not supposed to be on any type of post. So what does that mean then for the jail? Well, then for the jail, if we have special sections, which would be complaints, which would be classification. It is true you have individuals that have complaints, but then in the same token, I may have needed an individual from the classification section to work a post inside the jail, so their work had to be done. When I asked and sought for help from the other divisions, I did not receive that help. And I felt as though the perception of how the new sheriff came in was how he wanted the community to see him, which would be seen in the courts, could be seen in the warrants and in the field, and could be viewed in terms of the outreach program. But the jail has always been that place that you put people away, you close the door, and communities just, as of maybe the past few years beforehand, really weren't interested. But there are people that work there that cared and recognized that there were dangers and problems that were there where they felt they couldn't protect the inmate if needed to be, or couldn't protect themselves if they had to be, or complain if they had to. So what I did at that point, just because I had a lot of family calling me, and I said to them, I understand that there may have been a grievance submitted, call me. So I was fortunate because they would call me, so I would make those personal connections to find out, to see what was going on. We also had a monitoring system that worked where they could give internal messages, so I would check my messaging to see what was going on, and if their problem was not fixed, I would go back to see that it was fixed. But in terms of just the process itself, it's damaged right now. It's damaged because there are lesser people there in the jail than what had been before. Recruiting and hiring focus now, place new people straight to the roads or straight to the courts. And so for people who have done the long haul and have worked in the jails for as long as they had, that have been waiting for their turn, they missed their turn. When I went out on medical duty in August, up until about a month and a half ago, my understanding is we lost 20 additional people from the jail. Despite the pleas from the jail employees to get assistance from the Warrenter field, it went unanswered. And so there are now no officers in the units. At most recent, which was last week, we heard that there's 4 units that are locked down 23 hours a day with no officer inside of there. Why is that dangerous? It's dangerous because the introductions of drugs. In April of this past year is when we learned that there was, it's called K2, spice, and it was some type of it was supposed to be the synthetic marijuana that was sprayed on the paper. That was to be mailed in. Didn't have any type of aroma, no trace if it was quickly looked at for contraband, and it was given to the individual. Well, what they did is they would tear a little piece off, put it in a cup, and it would cause an intoxicant where they could get high. But then they started not getting the good stuff. They started getting either it was paper sprayed with Raid, Hornet spray, or if they really were getting stuff, it was the fentanyl. And in April, we really started to notice the behavior of the inmates. The officers were saying that the inmates' behavior was changing. They were acting zombie-like. They were going into convulsions, and from March up until the time that I left, it really had become an epidemic. I'm not really going to go into the depths of it, but we did learn that we had officers that were part of bringing in the contraband. There was an investigation, and the investigation, I'm not in a position to narrate how they were terminated, but the investigation did divulge that there was inappropriate conduct, that there was some of them bringing in drugs, and there was gang affiliation. So here, drug introduction being brought in, you have shortage of staff, and an inmate population that has grown over the years to believe that they have that power to stand up and take a stance. Everybody has a right to take a stance. It's just what fight are you fighting for? And some of them, the fights that they were fighting for were not prevalent and went beyond what should have been an issue for a deputy to have to deal with.
So what would you say are your safety concerns with the jail right now, and what would you prioritize? 2 or 3 things that you would prioritize right now.
Well, I recognize that the community is concerned and focused on the warrants being served. That is important. That is important, and has to be done. While I recognize that the community wants to see individuals go to court, I got that too. But there is a jail that has 2 large areas that the judges can come down and do court there at the jail. There is an actual courthouse section that they could use for a purpose. If they could go to the Classic Center with no security, I'd like to know why they can't come out to the jail. I asked that of the new sheriff, and again, it was an answer that dealt with the politics. Now, in terms of the courts, I recognize we got to do courts. Fortunately, I'm going to give Judge Auslander a shout out because he was really the only judge that helped us during the coronavirus. Because at that time, many of the courts wanted to shut down and didn't want to see anybody. And inside, inmates were, how are we being faulted for something that we have no control over? So fortunately, after speaking with Judge Auslander, we brought in laptops and live streamed all of the court processes for that to continue. Although from some of the higher judges were becoming perturbed because they felt that the areas were too loud and didn't want to hold the services there. With the warrants, to fix the problem, number 1, we need the warrants and we need the courts. We need our people. We even need command staff to work those areas. If you wear a gray uniform, you should not be allowed to go and do extra duty. That uniform pays you, so you should be able to go and work in the jail where it's most needed. I expressed to the sheriff when we first began that the jail is the heartbeat of the sheriff's office. At the time I left, there were 350 individuals, and at that time, 87 civilians. Yet, we were unable to staff it or ensure that we were prepared to protect anybody. And that's the true nature. You can't put 350 inmates in the back of a patrol car and say, hey, let's go serve warrants. I can't put 350 inmates in the back of a bus and go take them to the court. That way the judges don't have to leave the courthouse. But UGA, Police Department, State Patrol can help with warrants. They can help serve it. The courts. I understand that the judges don't want to come out there, but as a public official, my belief is that the sheriff should have been vocal and spoke to the community and expressed these are our issues. And while I can't remedy them quickly, in order to move somewhere, we gotta have a consensus answer that helps the overall problem. Not everybody's gonna agree to it, but can we get one step closer to improving it? But it didn't seem that way. I believe Sheriff John Q came over with the police concept and is trying now to make the sheriff's office a police department. They are two different entities. They do not operate the same. So they're gonna have to use that and also look into exigent policies. What if staffing is a problem? What do we do? Because you do need to have someone there to ensure that the inmates, number one, aren't overdosing, number two, are not being coerced or their families being harassed or they aren't being harmed, or that the gangs are not pulling them in. Because once those individuals go down that pipeline, they then become official, and when they come back, they're jumping in those other individuals that are in the jail. So just leaving them locked down and uncertain, that is a huge liability, huge liability. And it was a liability when I left, the pods were covered. I can't even imagine wanting to be over that type of liability right now. That's too scary, too many lives.
Is there anything else you would like to add? I've asked all the questions I would like to ask you.
At this point, yes, because John Q really, I thought, was coming in to make some huge changes for the jail section. The individuals in the jail section welcomed, wanted, sought that vision that he said would be transparent. It has been everything but transparent. And with all that has occurred, all he wants the public to see is him in his uniform and his chief deputy and himself. And I use his chief deputy because it seems as though his chief deputy makes more of the answers for him and assumes accountability more than he does, or the sheriff says, you need to go speak with the chief deputy. Officers in the jail want to say, aren't you the sheriff? And he says, you still need to go speak with the chief deputy. So a lot of improvement, even after Mrs. Johnson has completed her audit and has given forth these things. Not only do those things need to be reintroduced and reconsidered, but more things need to be looked into in terms of their behavior, in terms of their conduct. Right now there is a huge racial divide, and I will speak freely on that because I feel like I'm a rainbow. I'm almost every type of ethnicity that can be. So I'm about being fair, and there is a racial divide. So we do have many of the white officers that are being sent back to the jail, and it is considered a form of punishment. The jail section should not be considered a bad place to work. The jail, I loved it. That is Clarke County School of Education. You learn something new every single day. It's a humbling experience. For an individual that says they'll never go to jail, good for them. I have children, I have family. I don't know what I'd do if something would happen to them. But in the case what we have right now is a theology that has changed so different from the changes that need to be done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, I have one question. Can you just elaborate so people can understand what it means when 23-hour lockdown with the inmates? Can you just elaborate?
In reference to what it should be like.
Yeah.
Depending on the housing area, there are open bay sections, and in those open bay sections, there would be your lockdown times. Your lockdown times would be bedtime, lockdown times would be the morning time and lunchtime, or if there was a specific incident or medical situation that caused the area to be locked down. But if they were in an open bay, generally they are allowed to walk around, use the telephones, use the kiosk. There's now video visitation that has come in. They're able to go outside to an outdoor sector. They can take showers, bathe, and take care of the hygiene. 23-hour lockdown, that means that if you are not in an area that has a shower or telephone access, you are locked in a cell for 23 hours, and your lunch is brought to you and then fed through a flat door and then retrieved after that. So the hour may be they're rotating in and out people to try to get them to take showers or to be able to go outside to get some air real quick. And once that shift is done, then the other shift would come in and try to complete where the others left off, and it would just continue until potentially it all meets back where you start all over again.
When a person asks, is the complaint process working with HR?
No.
Okay, that was a quick one.
And do you know the
Elaborate?
I will elaborate.
you know the connection between HR and the jail? And when I say HR, I mean Athens-Clarke County's HR, Human Resources.
I submitted it. The drug, and let me expound. The drug had gotten so bad in the jail, I couldn't leave one night. I couldn't leave it. The rest of that conscious of me, because the amount of that we were responding to, Narcan was saving them. Now, just because Narcan is saving them does not mean it is keeping them alive. That's just sustaining them until the ambulance gets there. It became where the individuals were needing more and more Narcan. The last incident was on, I believe, April 6th. And at that time, we went up, a gentleman, fortunately, it was during a lunch hour. The officer saw him, we responded. He needed 6 Narcan to just keep that beep, beep, beep on the monitor going. And thereafterwards, another inmate had said, hey, the drugs are in the next pod. Go to the next pod. We were so understaffed that night because I had asked the sheriff, I was asking for different things and was told no every time. That particular day I did have to close release down because I only had 4 people. It was myself, it was a sergeant, a lieutenant, another sergeant, and the one release officer, but then they had to go fill a post. So we only had 4 people working that entire jail looking for these drugs. And it just became so overwhelming that I went to each unit and locked them down and told them just so that I would know that they were alive for me to come in the next day. I had to shut everything down. During that time, we found out that the officers, some of us have been exposed to the fentanyl. I was disappointed with the sheriff because I explained all of this to him, and he said that this would be something important to express to the community, the dangers that corrections inside jails that officers are presented with. 2 of them did go to the hospital. And during that time, everything just kept going just wrong, and I sat in my office one day and I'm like, I can't support this. I can't help people, and this is something that I love to do. I couldn't do it anymore and pretend it was okay. So I submitted in a 36-page complaint to HR, and I put in 15 different violations that are from fear of harm, physical harm, fear of termination, fear of retaliation, in-group, out-group bias, implicit and explicit bias, gender discrimination, hostile work environment, sexual harassment first-hand, sexual harassment third-hand, reckless conduct, gross negligence and concerning the jail. And it took 6 months for an investigator, apparently obtained by Human Resources, and he was resourced out. It was a TEB Enterprises, former Sheriff Thomas Brown, I forget what county he came out of, but it took 6 months for them to complete the investigation. And despite the investigation, He unfounded every single one of my concerns. He unfounded them. During that time, my spouse, who's been there for 35 years, was terminated. And once we received the report, we went into Human Resources and asked who signed off this investigation. My husband sent it out to the mayor, county attorney, Blaine Williams, HR, and nobody assumed accountability as to why the things that I've just briefly described, that's just briefly, because there's a lot more I could go into. It took 6 months, and then how could he unfind these things in 6 months? And one of the reasons that I did reach out to this organization is because I knew John Q was on y'all coattail. But then when the group came and sought, how can we work together, collaborate together, I was more than willing. It was actually some great conversation. They wanted a pamphlet, asked for a pamphlet to be put into the units in addition to an 800 number for certain people with low bonds to get out of jail. And when I presented it, it was flat out no, that he didn't want any affiliation with the group, did not want the community to know that he was associated or had any connections either.
Meaning AADM.
AADM, yes. AADM. And I'm not too certain there afterwards, you know, what took place. But verbally, some of the ones, I would give them the 800 number, or I would talk about it verbally to let them know that the group did exist. But at that time, he was very clear about not wanting to have association, although using AADM for his platform when running. And then again with Ms. Parker, I'm not going to go into the details with it, but there was some inappropriate conversation that went on in my office between me and him, and I did report that, and it was just chalked off as nonsense, and it was I guess considered to just be the gossip of the group. Again, I don't know how this individual was able to. We were told that because John Q is an elect, that he cannot be unseated unless it's a governor. But I'd like to know, what about Leverett? He is at will employee, just like myself, just like my spouse. But we were terminated because we put in a complaint. And that's where we go back to the human resources. Nobody has answered any of our questions other than to tell us they're sorry.
So those are the things we're definitely concerned about. Like we said, transparency, you know, these internal investigations are where it seemed like they should be leading to some findings, leading to no findings, and we just had an audit. So it's not like those things that she had in her complaint are just like unimaginable, you know. Once again, we'd like to thank you, and we're going to invite Commissioner Parker up here right now. Thank you very much, Ms. Coins. Once again, I remind you, we invited the sheriff, people from the sheriff office. You know, we asked for a representative more than one time to come down and be able to speak on the sheriff's office behalf. And we were turned down, but we're still moving forward with this. So, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How about y'all?
All right, all right.
Great.
So you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Commissioner Mariah Parker, District 2, so that's the east side. I've been in office since 2018. Have been a very strong proponent of public safety accountability throughout that time. And I see your first question, so I'm gonna go ahead and answer it. And that, you know, includes becoming you're trying to hide them from me. In that role, being someone in the community that folks impacted by criminal justice do come to with complaints, just as they have come to AADM. And in particularly over the last 6 months or so, I've seen an escalation in the number of calls and emails I've been getting from folks with loved ones in the jail, folks from within the jail and diversion center themselves, finding ways to reach out to me and let me know about things that are happening in there. And so, this feeling like a time where there's a critical, massive attention and concern around these issues, perhaps is also being an opportunity for us to make some real change.
Okay. And what would you say has been the nature of these complaints you've been receiving?
As they have not been investigated, as Ms. Goings kind of expressed, like even if there were an investigation, who knows if their findings would be, conclusive and thorough. I have heard allegations of sexual harassment against male inmates by female corrections officers. I have heard conditions described with regards to the utilities and access to basic things like water and a working toilet being inaccessible to folks that are incarcerated at the jail, which is then leading to mental illness. We've heard allegations of people like throwing feces at COs, but if you haven't had a working toilet and you've been on lockdown for 23 hours, what else are you going to do to get the attention of the people that are supposed to fix the problem? And so these conditions, in addition to those that are inherent to the jail, not being able to see your family, not getting to see, natural sunlight, actually kind of ginning up perhaps some of this unrest that Ms. Goins was describing among inmates. I've heard allegations of folks unable to get correct medical care. One woman called me saying her husband was throwing up blood and she was unable to get in touch with or access information about his situation. Myself included, when I called the diversion center, told, everything's fine, and unable to get any information about his situation. And so a number of things, both to do with staffing levels as well, the fact that folks are on 23-hour lockdowns just because they don't have enough staff to make sure, check on people, let them out. And as well, I guess the last thing I'll say is to do with the telecommunication system at the jail. And so because of understaffing and because they aren't doing in-person visitations, just video visitation because of the pandemic, there's a backlog of people who are trying to contact their families, trying to contact their attorneys. And so I heard one case where an individual alleged that they actually missed a hearing because they were unable to talk with their attorney who came to the jail to speak with them but could not get access to the video conferencing system, which then caused this person to remain in jail longer because his hearing had to be rescheduled, which, if true, would be a violation of their Fourth Amendment rights. And in addition to that, I spoke with one woman who's gone into debt to keep in touch with her husband in the jail because it is a for-profit company that operates the system, and the local government gets a kickback from the money that they get from inmates who are just trying to keep in touch with their kids, trying to keep in touch with their families. So this is the general nature of some of the complaints that I have heard. And I'm glad to be able to bring awareness to and also bring into conversation with what y'all are hearing and experiencing so we can figure out what to do.
Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between the Athens-Clarke County government and the Sheriff's Department?
Yeah, I think Ms. Goins got into this a little bit about, being an elected official. So John Q. Williams, as we all know, some of us voted for him, is an elected official. It's a constitutional officer. So it's sort of similar to like the three branches of government. It might be a helpful way to think about it. So you got the legislative branch, which was me and my colleagues. So we make, the laws, but then you have, he's not exactly the judicial branch, but it's like a separate branch of government where they have their own policies, they're separately elected, and they are not under our purview directly. It's branches of the same government, but we are not really over them in a policy standpoint. But similar to Congress and, let's say, the judiciary, we hold the purse strings. So we do fund the sheriff's office. The funding for the jail came from SPLOST, which was passed by a referendum by the people. And so this is this right now is a very important time for us to be asking these questions about what we can make better at the jail. Not just in terms of policy. I think that is a conversation to continue to have with jail staff and the Sheriff Williams about, but the mayor and commission decides how much money the jail gets. And that can be used as an opportunity for leverage around improving the conditions to say, if we are having a staffing issue, and does that mean we need to pay COs more? There was a disparity in the ways that public safety employees' salaries were brought up in the last budget cycle, where the sheriff's office did not get the same kind of raises as the police department. So ameliorating issues such as that. I would love to see us put in capital funding in this next budget to get the telecom system changed, because nobody should be making profits off of people just trying to stay in touch with their loved ones that are incarcerated. And so that is something that we could fund in the budget this year. So thinking about the ways that the mayor and commission and our, holding the piggy bank can help change these conditions so that incarcerated folks aren't suffering, and folks that are working in the jail aren't suffering either, because this is clearly a situation where this is bad for everyone involved.
So you have probably been on the commission right now and seen a couple of audits, and to where there were certain findings and things need to be improved. And I don't think all audits are as public as the one with the sheriff office.
There was a lot of public attention on it, I think, because the water business office people aren't like, oh, my husband's in there, all fired up about it. But yeah, this is something that the public really feels the impacts of. So I think there was a lot of attention on it.
So with the other audits, what is like the normal follow-up process? Like if we wasn't doing something like this, talking about the audit and trying to bring people in to talk about what is the status today, how would the community know about something like that? Or is there
in terms of changes that have been made since then? Sometimes I believe we'll do follow-ups where we kind of examine the ways that the conditions have changed through a similar process later on. That generally, ends up being between, I think, the mayor and commission and the manager's office, with folks individually following up to, follow up on particular concerns that they've heard raised since then, either by the community or by staff themselves. And so I think that what we're doing here is really important, because audits often come out of concerns raised, or a lot of, in short, a lot of change in government, if not all of it, comes about by collective action by the people raising issues and making collective demands. And so if it's time for another sheriff's office audit, then that is something that can be raised to the audit committee and others in government to get a more thorough follow-up on what comprehensively can we say is happening at the jail today.
So the community can basically request those.
There's no formal process per se, but similar to how AADM initiated the process by which we now have the Public Safety Oversight Board, that kind of hell can be raised.
Okay. The other question I had for you is, what should we do as a community? Like, after hearing this stuff, I'm sure most of us don't agree that's how we want our jail to be ran. And like Ms. Goins said, you never know when it's going to be you or one of your family members in this situation. So don't overlook this situation. We really should look at this as an urgent situation to move on. So what can we do? I understand that we could try to reach out to the sheriff. Our taxes pay for the money that you guys give to him. And we can try to have more transparency, or just have him to respond to, things that we've learned. And what else can we do?
I would say just encouraging, however you can, people to continue speaking out to help build that critical mass for change. I know that, going back to the issue of communications, it's hard for people to stay in touch with their families. Their mail is, surveilled and, sometimes confiscated and things like that. Folks are having a hard time getting on the phones or getting on the video conferencing. So showing persistence in those processes to make sure folks have that outlet to have their stories heard is really important. I would say that in addition, as a group, as a community that is sort of building a stronger coalition around these issues, paying very close attention to this time with the mayor and commission, as I referenced before with regards to the budget. So the manager's office sits down with department heads and gets their input on what sorts of budget asks they're going to have every year. So pretty soon we will actually be getting manager's budget that reflects the requests made by various department heads. So that'll include input from the sheriff. So at that point saying like, okay, given the concerns we've heard, how does this seem to be addressing these issues with regards to staffing, with regards to conditions, the living conditions in the jail. And after that, we then get a mayor's recommended budget, so he kind of goes and does a second round and decides what he would like to see us vote upon. And again, at that opportunity, thinking about how those budget requests reflect the concerns that we have and a seriousness in correcting them. And then your ultimate line of defense is the mayor and commission themselves, or the commission themselves. So, we usually vote on the budget in late May. And so between now and then, it's gonna come up real fast, but staying in touch with the commissioners, if nobody else, you can stay in touch with me, but about how you're assessing those requests. Is this enough? What would you like to see? I would even say beyond just conditions at the jail, because ultimately, at the start of the pandemic, 2020, the jail population shrunk to about 100 people. And everybody on the mayor and commission said how cool that is, and wouldn't we love to keep it that way? Because we don't want to lock people up if we don't want to, if we don't have to, if we can make our community safer in other ways. But since then, the population has tripled, and that is what's putting that pressure on the officers, the staffing problems. You don't have a staffing problem if you ain't got people who have to be put in jail. And so what are we doing about correcting those issues? And those are types of things that we can also address through the budget this year. How do we decarcerate and not feel the need to incarcerate as many people because folks are just, living healthier and more productive lives? So all those kinds of things, this is the time of year that they can be addressed more thoroughly than any other time of year. And perhaps under this commission more so than others to come. So that's what I would say, recommend to folks. Stay in touch with your loved ones, encourage them to speak out. One last thing I guess I will add that folks can do. It's my understanding that, because MOCA and perhaps others have reached out to us, like what's going on with the public safety oversight board, like what's up? So, we interviewed candidates back in February and have appointed all the civilian members, but my understanding is that it's still not in operation yet because not everyone else at the table has appointed their representatives. So the police department, sheriff's office, things like that. I'm not sure who has and hasn't. I know with the police department, Chief Spruill leaving, that may present some difficulties. But we need everybody, we need that body fully formed in order for that work to take place. So that's a good question to ask, what's going on with that? Because those complaints can be brought to them and thoroughly investigated, double check the math to ensure that they are really, really taking these concerns seriously. So pay attention to the budget, asking these questions about the Public Safety Oversight Board, and staying in touch with your loved ones, encouraging them to speak out. Because the more people hear these stories don't get told, these stories don't get out to folks. Or people don't take them seriously because they think somebody's a criminal when 80% of the people being held in there are being held pre-trial, not even convicted of a crime. So let's get these stories out there so that people will take them seriously and help fight alongside you.
Well, I feel like we heard some pretty disturbing things about the way the jail is being operated and safety, and I would say that would extend into public safety also. And, these are citizens of Athens-Clarke County, and we need to appeal to our mayor and commissioners to get the new sheriff to give us a state of, how we do State of the Union. We need a state of the jail right now. We need a speech to know what's going on. Some of us voted him in office. Our tax money is funding the jail, so we need to make sure that we're reaching out to our mayor and commission, and don't just make this a meeting that we just came to hear stories and things about what's going on in the jail. Really reach out to them, email them. Until you get a response, visit them. That's what they're there for. And make sure they make transparency and accountability happen at the jail. We need a response from the sheriff. We're asking for a response from the jail and from the sheriff about the condition of the jail, and what can we do as a community to improve those things, and what can the mayor and commission do to help improve those things. So I urge you to make sure you reach out to them, and we appreciate you all coming out today. We appreciate you all logging in, and we're also asking the viewers online to do the same thing. reach out to them. And thank y'all for y'all time. And
See, I want to, so a lot of people don't realize, folks that feel unheard, and after they go through the process, they reach out to AADM. A lot of people don't understand the role that we play. We cannot ignore these people, whether or not we are friends with the mayor and commission, whether or not we get along with John Q, whether or not we have elected or help to get him in office. My job is to listen to people because they do not have the support. It is very expensive to have legal aid. We do our research. We paid $1,300 for open records research before we had this town hall. $1,300. Which citizen have $1,300 to pay for an open records request? As we're having this town hall, September 25th, 2020, my son passed away in Clarke County Jail from a heart attack. I was told by inmates that it was slow process and getting in the guards and getting any help from the guards. They said it was hard to get their attention. My son, an African-American young man, passed away 3 days after his birthday. We cannot ignore complaints like that. This audit was done in 2019, 2018. They already said it was understaffed, and it doesn't seem like anything changed. So I urge people that is here, even though it's not under the purview of the mayor and commission, they still are obligated to us. And if the sheriff, we have reached out, and our job, our goal is to work together. Well, how as a community can we protect each other and work together? So folks, I'm sorry. Some of y'all are not going to like it, but AADM is not going to be quiet. And as long as people keep filing complaints, and after we do our research, we are going to expose it. And if people don't like that, then I don't know what to tell y'all because people are dying. So that's all I want to say because there's a lot of foolishness going on in Athens-Clarke County.
once again, thank you all. And, you know, like she said, everybody don't agree with everything that AADM does or how we move. And, you know, it's just like you got more than one church in Athens. You know, if you're not with our movement, join another one. And they're all preaching the same thing. So thank y'all again. Thank y'all again.